Hi, guys. How are you? My name is Kelsey Kernstein. This is Courting the Truth that you're watching right now. I've been a journalist for a long time. For those of you that don't know me, I've worked at the local level in multiple states across the country. I've worked at the cable level. And today joining me is defense attorney, Texas defense attorney, Jeremy Rosenthal. We're going to get to him in just a second. First, I want to break down this case, kind of talk about the police report, and then we can really talk about with Jeremy any questions that we have on this case and really how it's going to potentially go. So first, let's break it down. So this Karmelo Anthony, Austin Metcalf stabbing, it happened last Wednesday in Frisco, Texas. This was at a stadium. It was at 10 in the morning. It sounds like there was lots of rain when this happened. Karmelo Anthony was apparently, and I do want to show you guys this. You can see just what it looks like there at the track meet. This, of course, is pictures from the crime scene. It looks like it was taken from a helicopter or possibly a GoPro. But you can see that these are pretty small tents. You've got the memorial tent. I believe there's a centennial tent, and that's where Anthony went to school, Karmelo Anthony. Austin Metcalf went to Memorial. But it sounds like what was happening, this was a weather delay. This was a track meet. It was happening at 10 in the morning on a Wednesday, last Wednesday. And it just so happens that Karmelo Anthony was sitting or standing, that's not clear to me yet, was in the tent area of Memorial High. What is still not clear to me also, I'm not clear, and maybe Jeremy can kind of help me with this down the road, and we'll ask him, if they were sitting, if they were standing, and if Austin went up to Anthony, or if Karmelo Anthony, or if Austin, or if Anthony went up to Austin. That's not exactly clear to me. But this is what it says in the police report that I read to kind of break this down. It says that Austin said to Karmelo Anthony, "You need to move." In which case, Anthony, reaching into his bag, said, "Touch me and see what happens." Then, per that police report, it says, no one really thought that Anthony, this is in parentheses, no one really thought that Anthony had any weapons in his bag. And it goes on to say that Austin proceeded to touch Anthony. And then Anthony then said, "Punch him and see what happens." It then went on to say there's been a couple other theories where multiple witnesses were interviewed by the police. And you had witnesses that said that Austin grabbed Karmelo Anthony, that shoved him, pushed him. They all had different language, different verbiage, which of course is really important. But then what happened is Karmelo, he pulled out his knife, stabbed him in the chest, and then ran from the scene. But also sounds like he discarded the knife because the knife was found in the bleachers area, bloody. And obviously it was raining, it sounds like, when the police got there. And then when police got there and they were arresting Karmelo, he said, "I'm not alleged, I did it." Also in the police car, he asked things like, could this be considered self-defense? Other things he asked were if Austin would be okay. Didn't know his name, but said, is he going to be okay? Which shows concern. We don't know the size of the knife. We don't have a lot of details on the knife. We just know that this was a black knife. I do also want to mention this. There's been a ton of fake reports out there, a ton. There's been a fake autopsy report out there. There's been a fake press release out there about what exactly happened. People saying that Karmelo was jumped by the twins, that they smashed his phone, that it was up against the bleachers, and the twins really came at him. So for anybody that doesn't know this case, Austin Metcalf has a twin brother named Hunter Metcalf. They are identical twins. I do want to show this clip real quick because it sounds like the Karmelo Anthony family, they now have a spokesperson named Dominique Alexander. He has spoken in the last 24 hours or so, just kind of debunking some of these myths and claims out there that are fake. He also has come forward saying that the Karmelo Anthony family is receiving death threats, and they are getting pictures sent to their homes of children with knives in their head, and said it's got to stop. And he also said that these fake stories have to stop because they're actually hurting Anthony's case. So let's show this real quick.
A statement being sent out.
Hold on here. Let me add it to
chief. That was false. We have saw a false autopsy report. That was false. We have to caution the community to say, hey, We cannot trust everything that is online. The disinformation that is going online is hurting this case. And it has to stop. It has to stop, y'all. As we know it right now, Austin Metcalf and Karmelo Anthony did not know each other. They did not know each other. Let's stop it. They were not at a party together. Let's stop the lies regarding this situation. We also know that both Austin Metcalf, the twin brothers, were on the roster that day to be at that track meet. We also know that Karmelo Anthony was on the roster that day to be at that track meet. We know they both arrived, all of them arrived to this facility via the transportation of Frisco ISD. The lies has to stop, y'all. As far as the legal strategy, I'm not talking about that today because that's not my.
Okay, so that right there was the spokesperson for the Karmelo Anthony family. I do also want to show this because they have now raised more than $300,000 as of this morning. I took this as a screenshot. So they've raised an enormous amount of money. I do want to show this also. These are the twin brothers. This morning, the DA said there will be no death penalty. So that was huge, an announcement this morning. And I think this is important to also kind of lay out. Austin's family, his father has said that his son was a high school star football player, also said that he was voted most valuable on the team. He also said that he had a 3.96 GPA. Well, just about, I don't know, maybe 12 hours later, you had Karmelo Anthony's father then coming forward saying that, let me see here if I can show this one, saying that his son had a 3.7 GPA and that he had college football offers. They've raised more than $300,000. And that's where I now want to get to Jeremy Rosenthal. He is a Collin County attorney who works in this very same county where this incident took place. He has 20 plus years of experience. He's worked on homicide cases and self-defense cases like this one. Jeremy, thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you, Kelsey. How are you?
I'm great, thanks. Okay, so let's get right into it. And I'm just going to bull in a china shop. Does this self-defense claim, does it have any legs?
It's going to be hard to make it work. The way that self-defense works in Texas is that it has to be proportional. And we have two very broad categories of self-defense. One is if we are in fear of being injured or in fear of assault. Another is if we are in fear of what's called serious bodily injury. If I'm afraid of just illegal contact or unpleasant contact or unwanted contact, I'm allowed to inflict what's called bodily injury. I'm allowed to hurt you. In essence, if somebody is attacking me or touching me in an unwanted way, I'm allowed to hurt them to get them to stop. That's the rule. If I'm afraid of serious bodily injury, then I'm allowed to use what the law would characterize as deadly force. So we have these two very broad categories. The problem from Mr. Anthony's standpoint is that he is going to have to raise a defensive issue that the burden of proof is on the state of Texas to prove all the elements of the case. If all the elements are there, the defense has to raise the issue. They don't have to put a whole bunch of evidence up there, but what they do is they raise the self-defense issue, and then the state has to disprove that beyond a reasonable doubt. It can be very confusing, but in essence, Karmelo Anthony would almost certainly have to take the witness stand and say that he was in fear for his life here. And I don't know that anything that I've heard is really going to quite equate to that. Maybe a childhood memory, maybe something is being triggered with him. it would have to be something like that. Something that you said, Kelsey, kind of made me think that that maybe he's there with his twin brother. Maybe he's concerned about being attacked by a group of people. Maybe that can kind of help get it there. Self-defense is going to be a difficult sell. And in this situation, look, I mean, I didn't do it was never going to be a defense anyway. So the fact that he admitted to it, I don't think if I don't know that it really helps him that much, but at least he's being honest about it, because he was never going to. It's not me, or it wasn't me, was never going to work here. So turning to self-defense, that's probably the most obvious next choice of defensive theories in the case, but it obviously has some challenges.
Do you think it hurts him with him admitting it right away? I thought that was interesting. What do you telling an officer, it's not a ledge, I did it. What are your thoughts on that statement?
A lot of this is going to turn on the degree of premeditation and the degree of culpability, and readily admitting to it just goes to tell us, I think, what we all know, which was this was not a massive plot. Karmelo Anthony didn't wake up that morning intending to kill anybody. So I think it sort of tells us what we already know here, that this is a young man who acted in a highly emotional situation, but it doesn't sound premeditated. And when you readily confess to something, you obviously were never trying to really get away with anything anyway. So if I'm defending him, I'm arguing that shows honesty, it shows sincerity, it shows to some degree responsibility. If he ran away from the scene, tried to discard the knife, I mean, tell me a lot of folks in this situation who aren't going to panic and do something like that. So I don't know that hurts him terribly badly, but I think the admission is he's telling everybody what we already know.
Yes, you've got the coaches there that confirmed it. You have the other witnesses there that confirmed it. He's going to have the DNA all over the knife. So what you're saying to me is you really think that there's no way that this case could be acquitted?
I don't know that I would go that far. I think that there's an interesting case that maybe you or and your viewers are familiar with. It happened right here in Collin County, USA, which is the Candace Montgomery murder trial. And there's a couple of they've made a couple of television shows on that, and this was a case that happened in the early 1980s, and it was a self-defense case. And in that case, the victim in the case was a lady by the name of Betty Gore. Candace Montgomery had been sleeping with her husband. It's a long, torrid affair. Really, if anything, I've gotten to meet the investigators in the case, one of whom is a really, 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 really heavy set, what in Texas we would call a bubba, who was later portrayed by Justin Timberlake in a movie just this last year, which just tells us there's hope for people like me, that one day a great Hollywood star is going to come and portray you in a movie, regardless of what you might look like. That aside, the self-defense theory in that case was that Betty Gore, these two ladies, these two women were in a laundry room arguing over this affair that had happened. Betty Gore took an axe. The victim had an axe, and there was a baby sleeping in the other room, and she motioned when Candace Montgomery was being loud, and she said shush to her. The defensive theory in that case was that Candace Montgomery, that triggered a trial, that triggered a childhood memory from an abusive relationship when she was much younger, and that's what triggered her to feel that she was in danger of serious bodily injury. It worked. It resulted in an acquittal. It was very scandalous here in Collin County. Again, in the early 1980s, when I was a prosecutor here, you didn't talk about that case, okay?
Yeah.
Because we still had people running around who had participated in that. So if there is a self-defense issue here, it's going to very much have to come from Karmelo Anthony's own mind, own thoughts, own beliefs. And that an all-out acquittal may work. I think what's more likely is going to be a diminished intent, and we can probably get into that. We can nerd out about that here in a minute.
Okay.
But I think that's going to be a more likely defensive avenue.
What do you think of these statements such as touch me and see what happens, punch me and watch what happens? I mean, I've heard from, one attorney saying that's provocation. I've heard from other people saying, no, that's a warning. How would you build a case like those statements? What would you say about them?
It would mean that we would be acquitted of assault. It would mean that we would be acquitted of hitting him back. Texas has, and most states have, what's called consent, right? And consent in an assault case sort of works like this. Think of, and we here in Collin County, USA, and I call it that because we are the center of the universe. Just ask us and we'll tell you just how central we are to America and everything.
Yeah.
In Collin County, USA, we have the Star where the Dallas Cowboys practice. Those guys assault each other all day, every day, right? When you touch another person, when you hit another person and they say, ouch, that's assault. Well, why is it not a crime? It's not a crime because when you put on the pads, everybody knows that you are consenting to be hit. I am agreeing that I'm going to come and try to hit you and you can try to hit me. And we have the rules of football, which means I can grab you, I can do this, I can do that. I can hit you this way, I can do that. Now, that would be consent. And if one player exceeds the scope of the consent, we've seen cases where a player might take a helmet off and swing it at another player. Okay. You can't consent to aggravated assault. You cannot lawfully consent to being hit with a weapon or something like that. So that would be the scope. And to bring it into everyday terms, Kelsey, think about this. If you are at a bar at 2 a.m, I don't get to do that much anymore in my life, but when you're at the bar or 10 at night, which might be, or 9 at night or 8 at night, which is where you might see me, but when you see two people who are in each other's face, right, at the bar at closing time, I mean, what's this guy saying to this guy? He's saying, bring it. No punches are thrown. Nobody is being hit yet, but that is the very definition of consent. So in a fighting or in an assaultive situation, because when two people are like this, they're both telling one another, bring it. That's what's being communicated. And if that happened here, it would be a defense. The problem is the scope of the harm, the use of the deadly weapon. In that first category, this would fit fine. But in this second category, it doesn't work.
Got it. Now you have witnesses saying that Austin then grabbed, they used grabbed, pushed, shoved was also language that they used. There's been a lot of people online saying that's assault. That's assault. So of course he can stab him. What would you say to that?
They're correct. It is assault, but you cannot stab him. You cannot use deadly force to repel force in Texas. Self-defense is proportional. And again, in Texas, the way we define it are those two really big, clunky categories. And to kind of bring it down, you can defend yourself from offensive contact, right? If somebody grabs you, touches you, or is about to spit on you, or you think that they might do that. Let's not forget that we don't have to get shot to exercise deadly force in self-defense, right? If somebody else is threatening force and it's imminent, and we believe that it's imminent, again, we're allowed to repel it. Or any type of really illegal contact. We see a lot of cases where one person might just grab another person or touch another person, maybe even inappropriately. In that instance, assault is an appropriate way, or causing bodily injury to that person is an appropriate way to repel that. But it's got to be proportional. You cannot use deadly force to repel force.
Okay, there's limitations to the law. Do you think that there is any way that this won't go to trial, that potentially, and right, you've got the defense team asking for it to reduce the charges and reduce the bond. Do you think that's even a possibility?
I think it's unlikely. Let's start with a bond. With a bond, you've got $1 million. That's a very common bond that you see in a lot of murder cases. And when you're making bond, there's really two main considerations that you're kind of thinking of. And can I nerd out on bond for a minute?
Yes, you totally can.
We don't. Okay, we don't talk about bond a lot, and I think it's important. And sometimes we throw it around, and maybe this helps it make sense for everybody. In America, you cannot be convicted unless you were there. It's in the Constitution, right? We don't try people in absentia. You can't. It's also in the Geneva Convention. We won't deport you, or we won't send you to a country that will convict you in absentia. Being present at trial is really important. Here's the problem: in civil court, you don't have to show up, but you also don't have to win. If I'm in a car accident and I sue somebody, I don't have to go to court, but I don't have to win. If I get sued, I don't have to show up. If criminal court were optional, nobody would go. If I tell my client, "Hey, Joe, they want to sentence you to 40 years in the can. Can you be there Wednesday at 10? And we may lose, and you're going to go in forever and ever and ever. But what do you think?" Jeremy, actually, that day doesn't work for me. I got to rearrange my socks. If it was completely voluntary, nobody would come to court. So the theory of bond is that we take you, we put you in a cage, you pay money to get out. That money has to be enough to secure your reappearance. We've got to put your parents on the hook, your mom, your dad, your uncle, your brother, your cousin. Anybody and everybody who's paying money has to have a financial stake in making sure that you go to court. $1 billion is probably out of reach, and that in itself may be sort of problematic. The second issue with bond is that the court in Texas is charged by law with making sure that the public is safe. We got a guy who stabbed somebody and killed them out of the blue, potentially. If we believe that probable cause affidavit, then we've got somebody who committed what could be a cold-blooded murder. I don't know any judge that feels like being on the cover of the Dallas Morning News for letting this kid out. Not without some type of restrictions, not without some type of psychological evaluation, not with some type of meaningful safeguard to the public. That's why I don't think the bond gets lowered.
So it will be up to the judge to decide whether to reduce the bond or the charges.
Correct. So there's a judge that set the initial bond, and that judge can do something with the bond or not. You can also file what's called a writ of habeas corpus pre-trial. That probably is another word that you hear bounced around a lot. You can file a writ of habeas corpus and go to a separate judge who's a district judge who's elected, and that judge could evaluate the bond. But I would be very surprised to see this bond move south anytime soon, not without some really hardcore psychological analysis and not with some meaningful safeguards. Just given the facts of the case, I think would be kind of alarming.
Okay. Now let's talk a little bit about, because from all of the reading that I've done, to say that this is murder in the first degree, you have to be able to prove that this was intent to kill and this was premeditated. Of course, that's murky. What would you say when it comes to premeditated? Do you think that the prosecution really has a case to build on that?
That's going to be a really hard. That if the prosecution's got challenges in this case, that's it. Which is, what do you have? You have that he brought a knife with him. Okay, great. And you have that he stabbed him in the heart. That can be very tough. That in and of itself. Also, if I'm the defense, I'm really seizing on the statements that he made after the fact, asking if Austin Metcalf was okay. That shows we didn't plan to kill the guy, and we didn't think that we killed the guy. Is he okay? Makes it sound like, look, I was trying to sort of get out of there. So if there's a challenge here, I think it's that. And to nerd out again, just for another minute or two here, Kelsey, if you'll indulge.
Yes, please.
You're very kind. Nobody listens to me this much ever anywhere. Um, but when you're taking the bar exam, when you're in criminal law 101 in law school, what they teach you specifically with regards to murder and homicide is that you follow the intent. It's 100% about the intent, and that's going to dictate obviously the level that you go. In this case, the prosecution, if they charge it as homicide, that in Texas is a first-degree felony. It's 5 years to 99 or life. The next one down would be manslaughter, which is reckless homicide. And I think the defense has an excellent argument for that. I wouldn't expect the state of Texas in this case. I wouldn't expect the DA's office to reduce it to manslaughter on their own. However, at trial, that would be something that I think the defense could argue and could potentially argue successfully is, look, this was a reckless homicide. He grabbed the knife. He felt threatened. Okay, maybe he overreacted, and maybe he shouldn't have grabbed the knife. But when he did, he certainly did not intend to end this young man's life. This murder was reckless. There's also other things that can mitigate your mental state in a homicide or in a homicidal situation, if you will. Sudden passion. You take cases where you take a love triangle where somebody comes home and, oh my gosh, I can't believe what's going on here. There's some hanky panky, and it turns deadly. In that instance, that mitigates your mental state, right? It takes it from a capital murder. And by the way, I don't know, as a side, the DA announced that it wouldn't go capital. I don't know legally that they could have gotten there anyway.
Interesting.
We can unpack that here in a minute too. I don't know that they could have gone capital anyway, even if they had wanted to. But the point is that it's all about your mental state, right? It's all about that premeditation, and it's about the intent to kill. Homicide is a specific intent crime, meaning that you have to intend to take somebody else's life. The prosecution could probably charge this as a first-degree aggravated assault with a deadly weapon, which is a general intent crime. All you have to do is intend to use a deadly weapon in the commission of an assault yourself. So there are other ways to get to bigger punishment ranges.
Well, I think for so many people, what they're so passionate about, and people have been commenting. I think I have 10,000 comments on one of the videos that I did covering this case, and one of the comments said, "This guy killed someone." Sorry, I should say TikTok is if you use the wrong language, I'm going to try to say unalived. Sorry, I will try to say unalived because TikTok will take down the video. You've got people saying, Karmelo Anthony, I don't even think you can use the term allegedly, but I have to, even though according to the police statement, he said he did it. Allegedly unalive somebody. 10 years, 20 years, that's not enough time. So when you're looking at the homicide, you just said this could be manslaughter. Well, how much time would that be? When you also talk about homicide, how much time would that be?
Manslaughter would be 2 to 20 in Texas. First degree murder would be 5 to 99 or life, obviously subject to rules of parole. There's your short answer. And in a case like this, you would expect a jury and there's just a lot of different factors that go into this, that go into the punishment of a case like this. A lot of it has to do with Karmelo Anthony himself, his upbringing, struggles, problems he's had. Was he bullied? Why did he react this way? Why was he bringing a knife? A lot of it's going to have to do with Austin Metcalf's family. Do they come in and are they? And look, I mean, victims of a case. I mean, they are allowed to be victims, and they are allowed to have their own thoughts and opinions. One thing that I argue to jurors is that you can, as a victim, you obviously have a right to vent. You have a right to have your opinion. What you don't get is a force field, and you don't get to say, well, this is what happens here, right? We don't, that's not how our system of justice works. They come to court and be very forgiving. They could come to court and they could be very angry. I think all of us would agree that either are justified.
Mhm.
And we just can't put ourselves in their situation. But if they come to court and they're very forgiving about it, a jury may take mercy on that, or a
Interesting.
judge may take mercy on that. So that's what could really affect the punishment in this case.
And I think that's interesting because we've already heard the father come forward, and this was just right hours after
Mhm.
this situation happened. So the way he feels could have changed, but he said, "I forgive him. I forgive him for doing
Right.
this." And he said he's very godly, and that's what's getting him through this. Um, but of course, those feelings and emotions could change with time. Another question that I have for you, and this is interesting to me, and somebody wrote me this in the comments and said, specifically, he saw a prosecutor come on TV and say that if he were doing this case, that he would say that this was a weapon on school property that shows that it's planned, that he took a weapon to a school property event, then sat on the opposing tent, and then unalived a star athlete. This is not going to look like self-defense. What would you say to that, being a self-defense attorney?
I mean, that's one way to advocate it. I don't know that folks watching would necessarily agree with all of these things. Carmelo Anthony certainly has more than zero culpability here, but I don't know quite how evil this is. And you also sort of, Kelsey, brought an interesting aside to all of this. Experience tells me that there's a lot of sparks flying under this tent. Why is Carmelo sitting under there?
And
Why?
let's point this out and I want to show this. I
Mhm.
didn't realize how small the tents are. Sorry,
Yeah.
I'm going to show this in just a second here. Add to stage.
I mean, look, is he sitting with a girl? Is he trying to talk to some friends? Is he talking loud? Are they getting into it over the Dallas Mavericks trading Luka Doncic? I mean, what's going on under that tent that causes him to be sitting there? B, that's so annoying to the complainant, to the victim and his brother, to say, all right, it's time for this guy to go. And look, teenagers are going to do these types of things, and this, in a perfect world, would have been a teenage fight, right? It would have been some sparks flying, and hopefully even just no swinging or anything like that. As it turned out, it was quite tragic. But there's a lot more that happened there than meets the eye. The reason that I don't know that this goes capital is because you have to have an underlying felony to make it a capital murder. And I don't know that bringing a weapon onto school grounds quite gets you there. It creatively, it could. I think a jury probably doesn't go with you on that. Usually you see a capital murder in the continuance of a robbery, in the continuance of some other plot, right? Somebody's going to plan for months and months and months to off their spouse for insurance money. And those are examples of capital murder. Somebody threatens a police officer or the victim is a police officer or somebody like that, or a child. I believe it's under 10 years old in Texas. That's what gets you capital murder. So this doesn't look like a capital murder to me.
Okay. There has been massive amounts of public vitriol when it comes to this case. People have made it a race case. And, it's fascinating. I have looked, and there's been quite a few stabbings at schools that take place every couple of years across the nation, and probably more than that. We just don't hear about them. But the public cares so much about this case. Would that likely affect the verdict?
I don't know that it would. Collin County is a big county. We have close to 1 million people here. We like and juries. If you've heard of a case, if you're familiar with it, it's not enough to really transfer the venue. It's not enough to get it moved from one locale to another. What you do is you get a deeper jury pool. And in Manhattan last year, the most famous recognizable human on the planet had a trial, and they were able to seat 12 people. Now, we can agree or disagree whether those people were fair, but at a minimum, they were all asked, do you have an opinion of this person? Have you formulated an opinion of this person? Have you formulated an opinion of this case? And if the answer is yes to any of them, they're gone. It may mean that we have 1,000 potential jurors instead of 200 potential jurors. But we do have a large metropolitan area here. And tragically enough, in America in 2025, we have a lot of people who are more interested in, they don't watch enough true crime podcasts. They watch podcasts about cats and dogs and and the cosmos and things like that. So we'll find 12 people who I think will be able to sit fairly on the case.
As of right now and what we know so far, right? We don't know why he was sitting at that particular tent. We don't know why. We don't know enough about the knife, what size knife this was. I'm assuming it's a pocket knife, but we can't really assume. We don't know. Being a defense attorney and having worked on cases, homicide cases, self-defense cases similar to this one, just guesstimating, what do you think the verdict could be, if you feel comfortable?
That's fine. I'll throw it out there because just giving this a bit of thought, I think it goes to trial as a first-degree felony murder case. I think the jury convicts him of manslaughter, and I think he's sentenced to 20 years when this is all done, which would be the max. That's what I see happening here, and a good outcome in the court system is something everybody hates. Right? You know that you've made the right deal or plea bargain, or you know that the outcome of any given situation contested like this is the right one. A, if everybody loves it, or B, if everybody hates it. And I think in this situation, a murder's a murder, and nothing will bring Austin Metcalf back, tragically. His parents are enduring something that is unspeakable, and no parent should have to deal with what these folks, and no brother should have to hold a sibling as they die. It's going to be very difficult to fathom that Karmelo Anthony could completely escape culpability here. Anything could happen, and we've not talked either about mental health or not guilty by reason of insanity. I haven't heard anything suggesting that that's the way that this is going to go, but that's always something that, as a defense lawyer, I'm always making sure that there's no screws loose or anything like that's kind of taking place. But when you kind of look at this case from 40,000 feet, you have one life that's over, and you have one life that is destroyed. The punishment range for manslaughter is 2 to 20 for a reason. That's because there's cases where somebody's life being taken recklessly is appropriate for somebody to do 2 years of prison, and there's cases where it's appropriate to do 20. If every time a person died as a result of another human, that person automatically got life in jail, well, these analyses, these things would be much more simple, right?
Hold on here. This YouTube or this TikTok over here just shut off. So 1 second. I just want to get the people back live on TikTok. Okay, guys, we're back. There's a lot of people watching on TikTok. Okay. Interesting. So you're thinking manslaughter 20 years. You know, I did want to pick your brain on another similar case that happened in Houston. I believe the date was 2014. Sounds like this happened in a hallway, a school cafeteria, started with shoulder bumping. I'm going to show the case cover here. Hold on, if I can do it. Let's see here. Add a stage. It doesn't want to work for me, but this happened in 2014. Luis Alfaro was up against first-degree murder, also a 17-year-old who also stabbed somebody in school, had a knife on him, but he stabbed him he had 8 stab wounds. And it sounds like you couldn't really prove. There were a lot of people when it was a fight. It was like a brawl amongst a lot of students, whereas the defense team was really trying to argue, we don't know if my client stabbed him 8 times. We don't know. He had 8 wounds, but we don't know if it was all my client. But he went to jail for 20 years, still in jail. That's that's interesting. Don't you think it plays a role or plays a factor that he was only stabbed one time?
I think so too. And another point, Kelsey, these are 17-year-olds. And that is, I think, something that a jury definitely looks at. And what jurors do, in my experience, and I don't know if you've ever had jury duty, Kelsey. I don't know how
No,
many of the, well,
luckily not.
I'll tell everybody the trick here
Yeah.
to get out of jury duty. If maybe on the next episode to get.
Yes.
But jurors, they want to get it right, and I really do believe, and this may be a little cliche, jurors really go back and they kind of scale of justice things. They really, really, really do. Jurors don't like telling somebody that they're wrong and they're terrible, and they don't like somebody telling them you're right and you win completely. That happens. It happens in court. You see $1 million verdicts all the time. You see life sentences all the time. But those, in my mind, are on the fringes. Those are the rare exceptions to the rule, which is that jurors really love to split the baby. They really love to compromise and meet in the middle, because the truth is complicated, isn't it?
Mhm, it is.
These facts are complicated. It is not as simple as Karmelo Anthony is this evil spawn of Satan who just would kill anything. Who would unlive anything in in his path. I think even the people who are as angry and upset with Karmelo Anthony can be, I think they would even have to concede that that's true. So these things are a lot more complicated than that, and jurors really love to find that happy median, especially when you're dealing with such youth, from the offender and from the victim. Jurors, what they'll do psychologically, they will put themselves in somebody's shoes at trial. They just will. And one of the challenges of a trial lawyer is to make sure that that person that the jury is putting themselves in the shoes of, is the point of view that you want. You want the jury to see this from Karmelo Anthony's standpoint, meaning that you want to see his upbringing, you want to see his childhood, you want to understand why it was reasonable for him, in his mind, to bring a weapon that day, why he was sitting under the tent, why he could feel threatened by two boys who wanted him to leave, or at least one boy who wanted him to leave. If the juror is, on the other hand, and they're seeing it from Austin Metcalf's standpoint, that, look, I mean, here was a guy who came in, he wasn't supposed to be sitting here. He's got kind of a loud mouth. He's being abrasive. We don't want him here anymore. And then all of a sudden, next thing we know, we're holding our brother who's dying. Very emotional, very compelling. But to bring it full circle, jurors really do want to find that equilibrium, which is why I think that they take the lesser charge, but he gets maxed.
Okay. Now, we have not seen a trial date yet. Of course, this will probably, right? We're not even certain that this will go to trial, but I know his defense attorneys have said this will most likely go to trial. We know that they've raised more than $300,000. Can I just ask you, how much does a trial like this cost to have a really good attorney representing you?
Well, this type of money doesn't hurt. You would think that in most instances like this, and there's a lot of murder trials that have court-appointed lawyers in Dallas County and in Collin County. Most capital cases are court-appointed lawyers because the resources are just astronomical. You have a lot of work to do as far as mitigation, the forensics of it. You have to preserve the case for appeal, and then you go through rounds and rounds of appeals. So these things can be obviously very, very expensive. So the challenge here to fully fund it, if you're raising in that area for a non-capital case, I think you can mount a pretty good defense for that amount. Obviously, I'm assuming that the amount will get bigger. So I think they're probably in some pretty decent shape there. If it were a capital case and the death penalty were being sought, then no, it's not going to be anywhere near enough. Those defenses run in the millions of dollars, and
wow,
the taxpayers pick those up. Yeah, because again, you're litigating these things for 20 years. or 15 years at a time, and they bounce up and down. And Sonia Sotomayor is signing an order on your case in the year 2039. So these things yo-yo quite a bit, and they do get very expensive.
And when you say a trial, does it typically it's a year out? What do you typically see?
He's in custody, and that tends to speed up trial. I would think that this would be about a year. It depends on what judge he gets. Some judges, it's harder to get to trial than others. It's a high-profile case, which means that your judge is going to measure twice and cut once. So there's going to be a lot of pretrial motions and a lot of these things. So I do think that this is probably going to be a little on the slower track. I do think this results in a trial for no other reason than the DA's office is going to be under a little bit of pressure. And there is a sort of a prosecutorial train of thought in cases like this, which is, look, we're just going to let the jury decide this. We're going to present the case. This thing is so, for reasons that you've been kind of talking about already, Kelsey, just the social media and the rumor mill that's kind of gone round and round. This thing is such kryptonite and so radioactive, particularly for an elected official, that it's just really the smart, safe play for an elected official to say, we're going to let the jury decide this. We are going to go forward with this. We're going to let the jury decide it. So that's why I think this goes to a trial. Probably the plea offers are going to be something that Karmelo Anthony isn't going to want to accept. If the plea offer in a first-degree murder is 50 years at the age of 17, if I'm Karmelo Anthony's lawyer, I'm probably telling him we can do a lot better than that. But this may be a case that it's just kind of understood from the get-go that we're just going to go to trial.
Okay. Interesting. Now, I do want to tell people, everybody that is watching, you guys can ask me your questions, any other further questions that you have. Jeremy Rosenthal has said, a Texas attorney that works in the very same county that this event took place. He has said that he believes that a likely verdict for this would be manslaughter, probably 20 years. Of course, that is his thoughts and his opinions, but this sounds like it's going to be a jury trial. I'm curious on what you guys think will actually happen. Was there?
And if I'm right, Kelsey, you have to have me back on the show.
Yes, I do, and I have, and of course, as we get more details, because I think this is what it's really going to come down to. Why was he sitting or standing there?
Yeah.
Who else was there? These are all going to play a role. And I think, a lot of people have been writing me saying this is a 17-year-old. We have to remember he's being tried as an adult, but our brains don't develop until we're 26. And I'm also curious, is the defense going to potentially use that as a strategy?
Implicitly or explicitly, they ought to. Implicitly, I think, just as you've identified it, I mean, the jury, they're people. They're going to see Karmelo Anthony there. They're going to think of their son, their daughter, their son's friend, their daughter's friend, a relative, somebody that they know that fits that. And we all know what it's like to be 17. And we all know that but for the grace of God, many of us could have made a mistake. I don't know that quite the same kind of mistake, but many of us probably could have been in quite a bit of trouble had we done some of the crazy things that rattle around our brains at that age. So totally. I think that most people kind of think that. You can also, and it's probably the prudent thing to do, to actually put on evidence of that, to actually sort of do that. Although you don't want to, you don't want to ruin it. You don't also, you can, in some instances, you can probably kill unalive an ant with an atom device. I don't want to say that word either. So
totally. I want to ask you this. Katie's asking me on TikTok saying she doesn't understand whether, if he's being tried as first degree, won't they lose the opportunity for manslaughter? How does that work? Can you explain to everyone? That's
a great question. Manslaughter is what's called a lesser included offense. And again, remember, if you've been watching for the whole time, remember this. When we follow and track the intent, when we talk about murder, it always kind of tracks and follows the intent element. And a lesser included offense means that if you prove first degree murder, you've also proved manslaughter. You've also proved criminally negligent homicide. You've also proved assault. You've also proved all these things. And so what the judge can do at the end of the case, when they're reading that really long jury charge to the jury, the judge is going to say, okay, he can, but the parties have to ask for this. But the judge can say, okay, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, if you find him not guilty of first-degree murder, you must then consider whether or not this was reckless. And if you decide that it was reckless, then you shall say by your verdict guilty. So in other words, a lesser included offense means that we have proven all of these things, and there's a ton of law that goes into these things. If you're at home and you are really, really super duper just love to wonk out on criminal law, look at what's called the Blockberger test. That's the U.S. Supreme Court test for double jeopardy. And that's what tells us if a case is what's called a lesser included offense or not.
Okay. Shanzi is asking about the size of the blade. She asked first, has it been disclosed yet? It has not been disclosed. We just know that this is a black knife. She's asking if this is going to affect the outcome of the case. I was reading that if it's over 5.5 inches, that's considered a felony. What are your thoughts on the size of the blade, the knife?
It's probably most relevant to the optics of it. If he shows up to this thing with a knife like Crocodile Dundee, which that's a
massive, thinking 5.5 inches, that's massive.
Yeah. That's an 80s reference, so apologies. But if he shows up with something that's just, and there's knives and then there's knives, right? I mean, there's knives that you can chop carrots with and peel onions with, and then there's knives that are meant to skin people alive. And depending on what he showed up with that day, I think it has a lot more to do with the optics than it will do to any type of legal jury charge or legal motions. Again, it could be that, and 17, by the way, and I see the question is about, will he be tried an adult? The short answer is yes. In Texas, at the age of 17, you are an adult. So there's no need to certify him or bring him from the juvenile system to the adult system. He's already an adult for legal purposes.
Okay. I'm trying to think if I've asked all of the questions. Another thing that we talked about, I know a lot of people in the comments section have been asking about this premeditation. And what's so interesting is that I didn't know that premeditation can be a matter of seconds. That no planning really has to be proven, right?
Well, you can say the law says that the state has to prove intentionally and knowingly, and part of intent would certainly be any idea of premeditation. The best argument the prosecution's going to have is that he brought the knife there, and where he aimed the knife in the middle of this tussle would be there. I mean, what do you think's going to happen? You stab somebody in the heart. There's a reason you didn't stab him in the arm. There's a reason you didn't stab him in the leg. There's a reason you didn't stab him in his side. You stabbed him right in the heart. If I'm a prosecutor, that's how I'm arguing that.
I want to ask you one last thing, and this is so interesting. In Columbia, Missouri, when I was reporting there, I remember meeting with an attorney, and he said, I'll tell you, and I can't use the word that I want to say, but unaliving someone, there is a very different type when you are capable of stabbing someone versus taking a gun and shooting someone. That stabbing is much more personal. And I thought that was it's interesting thought. What would you say in regards to that?
That's pretty profound. I'm going to have to think about that. He's probably right. Although where I would probably challenge that, or maybe the first thing that comes to my mind when you say that is, well, when you carry a gun, or when you carry a firearm, when you do that, I think the things that are circulating in your mind are probably a little more lethal. When you're carrying a knife, you might be thinking a little more defensively, but the actual act itself probably has to be a lot more visceral. I would tend to agree with that.
Okay. Great answer. Question for you. Shanzi just asked this, and I don't want to take too much more of your time. So guys, this is probably the last question, but she asked, can you explain provocation when it comes to stand your ground law?
Great question. Typically, that's going to be when you are somewhere that is protected, your home or a car, for instance.
Are you protected in school?
Not necessarily. No, not as you are as if you were at home. That's a great question, Kelsey. When you are under Texas law, and this is kind of what you talk about with the stand your ground laws and the castle doctrine. When you are in your house, you do not have a duty to retreat. Also, if you are in a car and you're being carjacked, for example, there is a presumption that whoever's trying to get into your car is using deadly force. So you are, in that instance, entitled to use deadly force. For instance, if somebody is carjacking you in Texas. So that's typically the stand your ground laws are generally going to be tied to your location. A great question, Kelsey. I've never heard it put that way. Maybe school ought to be one, but I don't believe that it is.
Fascinating. All right, this has been an excellent chat. I just want to remind everyone, this is Jeremy Rosenthal. He works in Collin County where this incident happened. We're going to have him on again. That was fantastic. Thank you for dissecting the entire case and answering all of our questions. And I can't wait to do this again.
Thank you, Kelsey. Can I plug my my YouTube page is at
Please
Briefing.
plug anything. Yes, please go for it.
Just at Briefing Attorney. You will see that you will be amongst very, very few followers of mine. If you do enjoy people who nerd out quite a bit and say really silly, irreverent things. But thank you for having me. I enjoyed this.
Thank you for coming on the show. Bye, Jeremy. I appreciate it.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks
Bye-bye.
so much. Bye. Thanks. Bye. All right. Bye, guys. Have a great day. And I'll see you next week, 12 noon, Thursday next week.